we see through the BS as outdoor consumers. I like to say it's like you can change the colors on a Holiday Inn, you can put a trout above the door, but is that fisherman going to walk in and be like, this is my fishing lodge? Like, we see through it.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors, who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. What does it take to walk away from one of the coolest marketing jobs on the planet at a company that so many would kill to work for, to go sleep in the dirt and build an outdoor hospitality brand from scratch? Well, today's guest, Sam Degenhard, did exactly that. After nearly a decade at Red Bull, where he helped shape the world of action sports marketing, Sam traded corporate prestige for the unpredictable wilds of entrepreneurship. He founded Campfire Ranch, a next-generation hospitality brand designed for adventure seekers who crave nature but don't want to deal with the headaches of traditional camping. In this episode, Sam takes us inside his journey from Red Bull to the Backcountry, revealing what Red Bull gets right about branding and experiential marketing and how he's applying those lessons to hospitality, why most campgrounds and outdoor stays are fundamentally broken and how Campfire Ranch is fixing them, how building a brand as an opco while letting others own the underlying real estate allows for faster, more sustainable growth, and why today's outdoor traveler demands more than just a campsite, and how Campfire Ranch is redefining that experience. If you've ever dreamed of turning your passion into a business, building a hospitality brand from the ground up, or simply wanting to know what's next in outdoor travel, then you are going to love this episode. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Sam. All right, Sam, we are live. Good sir. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Zach. Great to be here.
I am ecstatic to have you on the show because you reached out and I get a lot of these inbound requests, Sam, and I have to admit, most of the time it's like some bro trying to sell some course, and it's like only even tangentially related to what we talk about on the show. And it's like, okay, I know you didn't even do your homework. I know you didn't you don't listen to the show or know anything about what we're trying to do here. And so I normally just kind of go and hit delete. But you caught my eye, and you were one of the few. It's about 10% that are like real legit, like folks who have great stories. And I always appreciate people who have great stories reaching out. So thanks first and foremost for reaching out. And I have so many questions for you, but I actually really want to start by hearing about what you were doing right before Campfire Ranch, because we're going to get all into Campfire Ranch to talk all about the incredible hospitality brand you're building today. But you actually came from one of the coolest companies, I think, in the world, and specifically from a marketing and brand perspective, which is Red Bull. So I want to hear the story. Like, how did you start working at Red Bull? What were a couple of things that you did there that were meaningful, and what attracted you to working for the company to begin with?
Yeah, super fun time in my life, and really most of my career was spent there at Red Bull in kind of the early years. So I actually started working for Red Bull when I was in college as a student brand manager, which is kind of, college campus rep, hooking up parties, throwing events, dropping Red Bulls on desks of kids that were sleeping in class. And I mean, couldn't be a more fun college job out there. I really loved it because it helped you kind of embrace this like guerrilla marketing mindset that you weren't really learning in marketing class. So I was studying business and entrepreneurship. And I got to like put all that to use in my Red Bull job, 10 hours a week. But I loved it. I've always been an outdoor athlete, be it skiing, biking, skating, whatever happens to be the focus of that season. And I quickly realized I wasn't good enough to be a professional athlete. And so Red Bull kind of gave me a little bit of a taste of what it's like to enable the people who have that X factor.
Mm.
And even at a college stage, it was super fun. I got to go to a bunch of larger Red Bull events and projects in those college years, and I got hooked. And so I kind of put all my sights on trying to work with them full time after college, which worked out for me. I was able to join what's called the Red Bull Graduate Program. It's kind of an accelerated internship, almost like MBA in a organization. 18-month contract. Moved to LA from Gunnison, Colorado, which Gunnison's about 8,000 people. LA is about 11 million, and total shell shock at first. But when you're 22 and you're working for a fun brand and you're living at the beach, you adjust pretty quickly. So I had a great time. I worked in U.S. headquarters in Santa Monica for a little over 5 years, and then ended up continuing with them on in Colorado in the Denver Rockies market following my LA time. But yeah, I loved it. Worked in the sports marketing vertical. So that encompasses everything from athletes, events, motorsports, flying sports, pretty much anything you can think of that has to do
Wow.
with sports and Red Bull.
Well, I wanna dig in just a little bit here because I think all there are so many brands, right, that they might be a consumer F&B brand. They could be a B2B SaaS, right, company, and everyone like tries to do the content marketing thing well, right, and they fail. By and large they fail, right, and or they have some meaningful success that like helps the sales team, but they don't become nationally, let alone internationally recognized for their marketing, their experience marketing, their content marketing. And yet Red Bull, right, has what is it like? Is there some secret sauce, or is there like a formula? Like what is in the water, so to speak, at Red Bull that has empowered them to kind of win the experience marketing game? And the reason I ask this is because we're now living in a world where people who listen to this podcast are trying to design experiences for guests. They're trying to leverage experience. I mean, they're building experiential stays, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that there's actually a lot to learn from a brand like Red Bull. So from your vantage point, what made them kind of special? What like where did they invest, or what did they do that was unlike the competitive energy drinks? Like I think about like a Monster drink Monster energy drink for example, right? Kind of grew up around, I don't know my energy drinks well, so please take all of this with a grain of salt, but sort of grew up like, or around the same time. I remember some friends drank Red Bull, some friends drank Monster. I honestly didn't drink any unless I was drinking like a Red Bull and like vodka during college, right, as a freshman. But like, but and so like, what did they do differently than the other guys, and why do you think they were so successful?
It's a good question. I think some of it was a bit more art than science, at
Mm,
least in the early days. I joined pretty early on. We were all in one office with Red Bull Media House. There's almost probably about 150 employees in Santa Monica. When I left, there was 3 offices and several hundred people.
wow.
And in the early days, like you're kind of just wide eyed and just watching and trying to kind of learn everything. And it definitely looks like chaos in those early years. You're just, wow, like, all right, we're going to go do this. Like who gave us permission? And I think it's probably twofold. On the business side, they were very open to taking risks and failing fast, which is something you probably hear often in successful businesses. But I think they took that to heart. You have a lot of ownership and autonomy to ideas and people being creative. And
Mm,
then, where those ideas came from largely was kind of athlete first, which is similar to that kind of customer first mindset. But
yeah.
have the best talent, the best ideas, the most inspirational people in sports, and then show that. And I
Mm,
think that's where it all started. It was just, let's show everything from behind the scenes to what's actually interesting, the way the athlete's thinking, what they're feeling, the stress, the challenge. Let's just show it. And then you start to kind of get this snowball effect of, someone watches it once, then twice, then they want the next piece. You give them the next piece, and then you start to build a strategy around that as you bring new projects to life. In terms of structure, awesome organization, and just the sense that you had sports managers, facilitating with the athlete, creating, developing, and producing a project, and then you
Mm,
had a team of media folks that would really kind of come in and figure out how to shoot and communicate what you were building without having to get in the way of the athlete's vision.
mm,
Sure, there was plenty of times there was conflicts of, hey, it needs to be shot this way for a live show, not that way. But generally, they would adapt and get creative with what the athlete or what the project needed, and that got to stay kind of core. So my takeaway from it in building a brand is, have confidence in what you're doing. If that is truly customer first and experience is incredible, start by just showing it raw and learning from feedback, and evolving from there. And then you can
yeah.
take that to the next project, the next thing you want to show or promote.
You know what's really interesting about that too is uh, you people spend so much time trying to figure out what's going to hit with their audience, right? And like what's going to work and why it works, right? And obviously, if you've got media that has at least some responsibility to sell a product, right? Which obviously it does in Red Bull's case. Like you need some metrics, you need some way to sort of like track is there good ROI here? Like is it actually working? And actually, what's interesting and just kind of hitting me now is what they did really well. What you guys did really well is you found people that were already famous, people that were already popular, and you figured out how to do content with them. Right? You guys were doing influencer marketing before influencer marketing was like super mainstream, but what's cool about that too is then you actually just get to test like a bunch of things, right? Because the content's going to be watched, right? And like that's what's really hard is like half the times you're just trying to get people to watch the content, let
Yeah,
alone learn from like is this good content or bad content, right? It's sort of like the secret sauce of no, let's just find somebody to bring into the fold that we know that the content will get watched. People might hate it, they might
yeah,
crap all over it, right? And they'll let us know, but at least we get a reaction. At least we know that it's being seen. I think for so many people, it's really difficult to get to the point where you're even being seen or listened to. So that's super interesting. So at what point in time do you decide? There are some parallels. You were in sports marketing at Red Bull, right? You guys, you love the outdoors, right? You love snowboarding and being adventurous. So there's that, I guess, connection to outdoor hospitality, so to speak. But like fill in the gaps for us a little bit. Like, at what point in time do you decide, all right, it's time to say bye to Red Bull and become an entrepreneur?
yeah. I mean, I think it kind of happened in a few ways. One was I traveled a lot, for most of my time at Red Bull, sometimes, for weeks at a time, and lived in a lot of hotels and weird places and special projects and site visits. And so I got to stay in a lot of hospitality, and Red Bull did a really good job taking care of us in those travels. So you were comfortable when you're on the road. So you got to see a lot of the traditional stuff, and some odd stuff out there just in remote places. But in my spare time, I was trying to squeeze in all of the outdoorsy stuff that I could.
Mm,
I worked most of my weekends, pretty much my whole career there. So when you had a free weekend, it was like, all right, I'm going to go max this out, get in the truck, like go camp. And the first stage for me was trying to recreate in Los Angeles when I came from rural Colorado was very different. You had to plan more in advance. There wasn't as much opportunity. You couldn't just go into the backcountry and park the truck and camp for 3 nights. It just wasn't that way in the SoCal metro. So I found myself kind of trying to squeeze and make things fit, and that really grew to a bit of a frustration of just I want to do it like I did it in Colorado, and then I have all these new friends that I want to take with me, but they're less prepared and experienced than I am. So my weekends I'm just coaching them the whole time, but I still want to get out on the bike. And that to me is like all those factors kind of started adding up into this I guess this problem that I really couldn't ignore. And I started putting ideas on paper probably in like 2015, and didn't start Campfire Ranch till 2020. So there's some early years of like, what if I did that? How would this look
yeah.
and feel?
It wasn't that anything was wrong. No, not really. It was just, I don't know, life. The kids were young, so full of life, but always needing more. Their careers were oh so demanding, and it always felt like saying no was just never an option. And somewhere in between it all, they had misplaced each other. The bickering had become more frequent, the patience thinner, Vulnerability, a rare guest. Romance, something that they promised that they'd get back to eventually, but eventually never came until here. At first, it was just a drink at the lobby bar. It's designed so effortlessly intimate, it made conversation feel natural again. Then a slow walk through the garden, up to their handcrafted safari tent, where a cellist played a song that neither of them recognized, but somehow felt like home. And then, without thinking, their hands found each other, without effort, without expectation. And suddenly, they were laughing, like they had on the second date at the coffee shop downtown that no longer existed. They were complaining about each other's mothers like they had on the cobblestone street in Rome under St. Peter's shadow. It wasn't an escape from reality. It was, in fact, their truest reality. It was them. At Journey, we're building a collection of stays that inspire reconnection. Do you know a hotel, a treehouse, a ski chalet, or other soulful property that has inspired you to reconnect? If so, share it with me at zach@journey.com. It's one thing again to have these ideas and have these feelings, right? And then maybe what you do is you just go and you get very diligent about your research and just trying to find the best place, like the places that do align with what you're
Mhm.
expecting. It's something entirely different to decide that, oh, I've been called to go create these spaces myself, right? And so tell us a little bit about kind of that decision in that moment, and what was the initial concept, I guess, like as you were thinking about what this could look like as you're scribbling on the back of napkins, what was the initial concept for Campfire Ranch, and what do you think it was about that concept that was so compelling to you, that was motivating to you enough to just say goodbye to a, a career and a company that, like, many hold in quite high prestige. Like, tell us a little bit about how that felt.
Yeah, so I think the early days was, camping solo and then trying to get friends to come camping and then friends coming camping and be like, I want to go more. And a lot of it was really centered around camping. And I was starting to kind of organize group camping trips towards my last few years when I was in LA. And I'd get, 40, 50 coworkers and friends of friends to come join on these things if I brought extra tents and had sleeping bags and packed all the firewood and had the water and had a little bit of an agenda, maybe even a carpool plan. Once I could put these pieces down for folks that weren't as familiar with the outdoors, I saw it kind of click.
Mm,
And I worked in a lot of event production, and so I knew that producing events was hardly a moneymaker. Even for a brand like Red Bull, it's very
yeah.
expensive. Popping stuff up, tearing it down, doing it the next weekend, tearing it down is challenging. And so I pretty early on realized, like, you got to have a fixed location to do this and make money. And
Mm,
then, I started wrapping my head around that. I'm like, all right, cool. So maybe I just buy some like lodge resort or some kind somewhere and fix it up and build my own brand. And then I was like, that's it. Being in Red Bull, you're kind of in a entrepreneurial, ambitious environment all the time.
yeah.
And I couldn't really get comfortable with like a one stop shop. I was like, this, if I'm going to do a brand, I'm going to do this thing like big. Like I want to build a brand that has some impact. And that's when I started kind of shaping what I thought would be a multi campground brand focused around car camp, van camping, and car camping, kind of RV free. That was one thing we always noticed, is if you went to a private RV park, you're shoved in the back corner. You're setting up your tent between the bathroom and the playground,
Mm,
and it never really felt right. And
mm,
so that's where the initial ideas started forming, and kind of led me to the next stage of the business, which is eventually I decided to enroll in grad school as an excuse to work on this business concept after work. We worked a lot of hours at Red Bull, and so it was like you close the laptop and all you wanted to do was like have a beer. And I tried to transition that to like, all right, close the laptop, open the other laptop, tune into class, and like see if I can beat up this concept from a planning and a strategy perspective that I wasn't having time for at work. So that's when things really started kind of transition from, all right, this is like a neat idea, to like, maybe there's something here.
wow. Wow. And again, just give us an overview of like what it was. So you said from day one, did you start, concepting and experiencing experimenting rather with Campfire Ranch? Like what was it? Basically, like the vision was, hey, let's start with these three campgrounds. Did you buy the campgrounds? Did you like lease land from these campgrounds? Like talk to us a little bit about kind of what phase one looked like.
Yeah, so the early concept was really multi-site campgrounds in that car camp, van camp, tent camp category, um, really centered with like a high amenity value. As a consumer, most of what I was getting frustrated with was policies,
Mm,
from booking 6 months in advance to having to pick an RV site to put multiple people in. Like the boxes weren't fitting with the behaviors in the current offerings, and so the original plan was just really kind of like high amenity, revised policies, and then started kind of playing with other ideas that I was seeing in the event world. So how do you bring like brand partnerships into camping and like get good gear available for people, and
mm,
give those brands exposure? How do you like program events and moments? And none of these things are necessarily new in camping. I grew up RVing my entire life, and have been to 48 states by the time I was 18. And it
wow.
was like, I've seen this, but I've seen it for families and I've
Mm,
seen it for retirees. Why isn't someone doing it for 20 somethings? And so
yeah.
I was really looking at, I think the early stages, like, man, I can't patent this idea, but like, how do you win if you can't patent the idea? And I didn't know enough at the time to say like, to think first to market and a good customer experience could be the winner. And that I realized that over time. But I think the main components of it were, let's do it right by the customer and like fix the problems that we're all seeing, and then listen and see if we can evolve with that mindset, and expand that camping footprint.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, during all this, I moved to Colorado, and that's when I kind of went from LA Metro to the Denver Metro and realized that Colorado had changed a lot since I left.
Mm,
And Denver was actually surprisingly like LA, maybe minus some traffic. But there's a lot of newcomers, a lot of people that wanted to get in the outdoors, didn't know how. And I actually found even more validation for Campfire Ranch once I got to the Denver Metro and being like, whoa, this could work here in one of the most competitive outdoor markets in the country. There's tons of options, but there still isn't a perfect one. And
yeah.
that's when it was like, I think there's something to this. Like, let's get a little more serious.
Wow, wow. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what Campfire Ranch is today then. How many properties do you guys have? How does it work from a consumer perspective? Is this am I buying like a membership? Is it really just hey, there's a catalog of different places I can go and visit and basically it makes camping easier. You guys I think have some cabins now. So tell us a little bit about like what the experience looks like today.
Yeah. So at Campfire today, like we're building a collection. We like to think of it as kind of physical hubs for people to gather in the outdoors. Focus that around what we consider the next generation. That can be essentially any generation that's looking to evolve from the one before it, right? Looking for something new, looking for their place. That's where we try and center the idea of Campfire Ranch around. What it looks like physically is really that collection of lodging properties. We look at everything from car camping, tent camping, and van camping in a campground setting, all the way to things like backcountry lodging, as well as bed and breakfast rebrands, micro hotels. We look for kind of the coolest, unique, weird hospitality asset in a market, and try and ask that customer in that market, okay, well, like, what is this? What's the best way to stay and play here?
Yeah.
Can we build that? And if the customer can inform us of that, then it's what product makes the most sense.
Mm,
We don't go into a market looking for 30 acres where we can fit 25 tents and have this format. Like, to me, that's backwards. It's a lot more like, what does the customer want to do here? Let's
mm.
get that asset and let's bring in those frustration free amenities, those gear partnerships, that programming, in a way that you can stay, and a lot of different options, but you're going to get that consistent thread of the Campfire Ranch experience.
So I want to dive into programming here a little bit because a lot of folks, especially who are building these kind of next generation hospitality concepts, kind of throw in community as like a buzzword, and I think that there are a lot of brands who like to think that they are building a community. I think, quite frankly, community is very very hard to build. you could build an audience, and many people have built audiences. It's very difficult to build like, true community. I think the difference being like, typically an audience is there for one person or a handful of people, right? Community is there for each other. And I think again, it's a very hard thing to cultivate. So from a programming perspective and from a community based brand perspective, what does that look like? So I come to a Campfire Ranch like experience, and like, what might I find? What might I discover?
Yeah, great question, and always a fun one because community is hard. It's something we still are learning about. But where we start is looking at properties or building properties that kind of create casual forced interaction. So
Mm,
to give you an example, like I like at our campground that sometimes at sunrise there's a line for the bathroom. For me,
mm,
that's a chance for people to chit chat, talk about their night, talk about the stars. Like I'm not even facilitating anything, but spare me building another bathroom. Like it's kind of a cool thing to see happening. And we try and look for properties that do that naturally. So whether it's a micro hotel or a bed and breakfast property, um, where are people going to be forced to sit near each other, right? I don't want to have a name tag on a table with your seat. I want you to be able to flex and pick. And maybe there's not even enough seats for everyone because as an event guy, I always think back, like make the venue smaller than you need it to be because
mm,
people are going to bump into each other and then they're going to talk and then the volume's going to go up in the room and the activity is going to rise. And all of those little kind of cheeky things you can do in the spaces can add to that interaction customer to customer. I think that's the most valuable is looking for ways that that customer can have a one-on-one with each other. You don't always win as the host trying to be the facilitator, but if you can make that customer a facilitator, opportunities like that are really powerful. And then I would say the other big piece is making sure our team that is front of house is also participating in that experience.
mm.
We like that when our staff wants to like stay at a campfire and have a beer with the customer and maybe ends up camping that night because they don't want to drive home. That's like a good problem to have happen. I need my team to feel comfortable doing that and be in a space where that's like green light. But when you wake up in the campground that your customers are staying at and you're in the line for the bathroom too, like there's some commonality that starts to happen. And for me, that's a pillar of the outdoors, right? It's
Yeah.
like I love asking the question during interviews for our front of house staff: what's the worst group camping trip you went on and why? And usually you get some pretty cool stories, but it's all about the human interactions, the interactions between people and the dynamics that have formed there. And if we can be kind of part of that experience, we're already like one step closer to credibility. And then asking that person to come talk about what hikes to do that day doesn't feel transactional.
Mm.
It's a lot more genuine than that. And so between spaces, the way we kind of train and encourage our staff to participate, and then finding opportunities for that customer to be the facilitator are the ways that we build community.
And then I want to go back to that was awesome, by the way. And I think like you hit the, nail on the head there when you talk about sort of designing these experiences like with intention. And I think it's so easy. Like I know several folks who are trying to build these micro resorts right now, and one of the biggest challenges, right, is like, hey, do you like how many like from an amenity perspective, do you build communal amenities or not, right? And like it's kind of this big question. Now, what you guys are doing is a little bit different because it's catered towards young, probably like single people, or at least people that like maybe don't have kids yet, or if they do have kids, they're not with their kids when they're traveling. If the goal is like 2030s, outdoors, that's probably your core constituent. Now, one of the big challenges is folks who are developing these micro resorts are like, some people are just like trying to freaking get away by themselves with their partner, right? Like they don't want to talk to anybody, they don't want to see anyone really, right? And like you think about some of the most exclusive resorts and hotels in the world, and they do a really good job at like creating these moments of privacy where like you do feel like you're alone if you want to feel alone. But then of course if you want to go and hang out and schmooze with people at the bar, there's obviously opportunity to go and do that. I think that design is so hard to do. That site design is so hard to do, and it's really hard to do well. And I think from a brand perspective, like from my perspective, you have to go one way or the other. Meaning, like you have to really lean into like, hey, you don't have, of course, we're not going to talk to you. This isn't like icebreakers at like a corporate retreat. Like, we're not going to force you to
Yeah.
talk to people if you don't want to talk to people. But we're also not going to do things to like, you know, make you feel like you're in this exclusive private camp experience where you can't hear another soul around, right? Or you can go the opposite and you can decide, hey, no, like we really want to prioritize exclusivity and privacy, and like we really want you to feel like you're on your own retreat. You're the only people here. I think when people say that they do both, it's very, very hard to do both because those particular things are counterposed. Now, what I would argue is that most people opt for the privacy, seclusion, like exclusive. Not nearly enough people operate for like a more communal approach to traveling. And I would, go so far to say is I don't even think it's like young single people that crave this anymore. I think it's like people that that are married and they're both working and they've got kids and that they want to leave the kids behind maybe for a weekend, but they also just like they want to go with their friends. Like they want to go have an experience with their friends, and they're open to meeting other people when they go and do these things too. Like I think my wife and I. This is probably biased, but like we've got two kids right now, and it's really hard to like make time to see your friends, like because when you're not working, you should be with your kids, like or at least you feel guilty about being with your kids. And then on the rare occasion where like you've got a babysitter, then you kind of want to go out to nice dinner just with each other and like catch up, right? So the friends time, like the time with friends, really gets kind of pushed. It's very, very hard to prioritize. And we talk about this all the time. We're like, there's got to be like an experience. There's got to be more experiences where, with appropriate planning, because that's the other thing is, once you have kids and whatever, like planning things with your friends, I don't know, you're like a quarter out at least, right? Like
Yeah.
you're planning in quarters. And what we talk about all the time is like maybe the solution to like getting more meaningful time with friends is actually like fewer, times together, but like more meaningful times together. So like what if we were to go do a trip together? But then it's like, you don't want to just go and instead of resort together. Like that's fun too. But like you also kind of want to you want to create memories where you're like, oh my gosh, do you remember that time? Like we went on that hike and then Bobby like broke his ankle, and like you kind of want those stories, right? Like those are the stories that you tell for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are fewer and fewer opportunities to like create to have the room for those stories to develop. And so what I love about what you guys are doing is, intended or not, you're creating a space where people can come and create very meaningful stories that they'll probably tell for the rest of their lives. Sorry, that was a weird tangent, but the big point I'm trying to make here is that I love that you guys are focused on this because I think few people are, and few people are actually doing it well. And I think that this is a massive, massive, massive opportunity. And I think you could do this at all scales of luxury. Like I think you could do this very simply, and then you could go up the ladder for sure. But I do think that this is an under tapped into and under well executed space. So I like that you guys are doing this.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's fun. I think that's one of the reasons I'm doing it. Like, personally and selfishly, my motivation is to help encourage people to get outdoors at scale. And I look back to the way I did that as a kid, and thankfully I grew up in a family that prioritized it. But it was group camping trips. It's the
Mm,
holidays. Okay, Halloween, we're going to Gettysburg, and we're doing ghost tours on the battlefields. And there's 15 campers in our crew with kids and parents, and like those are the moments where I got independence at a young age, but also got to like my mom and dad got to do their thing and do team dinners and all that kind of stuff. And like if we can facilitate those types of moments in a space, or a camping space or a lodging space, where that can happen alongside a couple having a retreat together that don't want to feel totally out in the dark or isolated, both of those things can happen in one space. And it's part of the way we look at new properties and growth.
So I want to speak. I want to speak about that for a bit here because you get your kind of core concept, right, which are basically like frictionless camping, right? You can kind of come in and you know that you've got things taken care of. You're excited, but then you've got these other structures that you guys have started build. I think you've bought some, you're renovating some, and then maybe you've even done a couple ground up builds. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Kind of look at it all.
Yeah.
When we look from the business side, I would say like we'll entertain anything that's built to suit. Renovations, which I look at as like 30 to 50% of the property value needs to get redone.
Yeah.
And then what we call rebrands, which would be something that's pretty turnkey and it just needs a spin and a different kind of element of hospitality. And then when we play property type, we pretty much look at like anything 20 keys or less.
Okay.
So we stay kind of in the category that's typically out of the radar of some of the bigger players, or just not worth their time. But we can do that authentically with a good labor margin, and create like a very comfortable communal space. I like things like hostel rooms. I like
Mm,
B&Bs. I like, hallways you got to walk past two or three rooms, indoors, then outdoors. Like I like properties that have kind of those casually forced interactions. And a lot of that stuff's been around for a long time. And
mm,
there's just a lot of people focusing on the customer segment that we focus on in those categories. And so I think that's how we look at property growth, specific kind of property level growth. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Currently, we have kind of two properties and a third coming online soon. So we have a campground between Gunnison and Crested Butte, Colorado, our first location. We have a backcountry hut or backcountry lodge in Silverton, Colorado, in the San Juan Mountains. And then we're under construction on a renovation for a bed and breakfast in Bella Vista, Arkansas, just outside
mm,
of Bentonville along the trails. And
mm.
then the other properties we're looking at, well, I won't share what they are because some are on market and off market, but we're looking for more cool assets like that.
Yeah.
And we go in with like kind of as much of an open approach as we can, go play consumer and try and determine what that customer wants before we like lock into an idea and say, yeah, it's a backcountry hut in this market. It's like, well, is it? let's go to the market and
Yeah.
figure out what people actually want to do before we make that call.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in a couple things that that you said triggered some thoughts. One is you talked about sort of these casual encounters, right? Where people can you basically are like kind of forced to at least say hi to some folks, right? And like how that's like a very important thing that's lost. And I'm thinking about sort of the Verbo campaign that I'm sure you've seen that's kind of going around. Like they've been doing this for, I don't know, well over a year. It feels like where basically the pitch is like with a Verbo, like you have the entire vacation home to yourself, right? Like it's we're not an Airbnb where you have a host that might be living with you, right? It's like no, like we're for people that want like their full space, their own space. And what's interesting about that, right, is to your point, you kind of do have to bet on that. Like as you go kind of up market and or you focus on sort of like larger units. I think it is harder to do this, but at the like 20 key and below like level, like it makes a ton of sense, right? And you actually can, I think, design meaningful experiences where folks can encounter each other. And quite frankly, like you actually might have an opportunity to build a little bit of a relationship with somebody because it's not a 200 person or 200 key hotel, let alone a 2,000 key hotel, right? Where it's just you don't even bother trying to make an effort because you're like, I'm never going to see this person again, right? With 20 keys, like you could meet somebody and you could meet a new friend, right? Like that you might
Totally.
travel to for the for the rest of your life. And like I love that could happen at a Campfire Ranch. I wanted to ask though about as you guys think about scale, it's so hard to scale, right? It's hard to scale anything. It's really hard to scale hospitality brands, specifically when the asset types are so different, right? And not that they're, I mean, you guys got some consistency in terms of like where you guys are looking to acquire and or build these properties. Obviously, camping is sort of the heart, the soul of Campfire Ranch, right? Outdoor hospitality is the heart and soul. But how do you think about like brand consistency as you scale unit types, as you scale locations? I think again, many have tried, and it's a really hard thing to do. How are there any, I guess, lessons from your time at Red Bull that you're sort of like holding on to and or trying to implement here, or how do you think about the importance of building a brand across, for lack of a better term, multiple SKUs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to like one thing we repeated at Red Bull a lot, which was local face, global brand. And I know that's kind of a played out moniker in some ways, and a lot of people use that mindset. But Red Bull did a really good job of actually building field teams on the ground that were connected with that local artist, with that local band, with that athlete, even if they weren't professional, with that organization, and kind of coming in with an idea to do a project, but sitting down in the room with those types of people and being like, what should we change? How should
Mm,
this work?
mm,
And what ultimately that did for them was allow them to execute really kind of authentic projects at a local
Yeah.
level when they're, bajillion-dollar company. And from a Campfire perspective, we try and do the same sort of thing with having multiple SKUs. Like I think Campfire Ranch should be in every outdoor destination market. You should have a Campfire Ranch option
Mm.
across the country. Is that going to be camping, lodging, backcountry? The answer is yeah. And what else, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does that customer tell us they want at that ground level, and then really trying to back into that. The way that we will grow, I think, successfully is continuing to like lean on that pillar of like, what does that customer really need? And
Yeah.
I see I see brands going into markets, whether I consider them competitors or not. I see them sometimes dropping in footprints and being like, oh, it's outdoorsy here. Like, let's throw one on this road. And you're like, well, unless you were really, you called that place your backyard, you would know like that's not where people are going, or not, it's too far away from downtown, or you're actually like making it more difficult for them to stay in that market. And not every property is perfect, but we try and qualify them from that customer point of view before we make a move. We're still kind of syndicating. We're an opco, so we're the experienced guys. We're the operator. We don't deal with the real estate side. We'll qualify a property and do the due diligence, but we bring in investors on the real estate side to secure the real estate, and then long-term lease back. So that's
Yep.
kind of our structure, which isn't unheard of in the hospitality world, but we think that's the best way to stay focused on the consumer and develop the right products.
Yeah.
And then let someone else who wants real estate investment. What we can offer, being diverse, is little de-risk portfolio. There's a lot of assets in some of these spaces trading right now, particularly, and I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts with, boutique hotels and inn operators. Like, what we're doing isn't different from what they did 30, 40 years ago. It's just
Yeah.
for a new generation.
Yeah.
And, a little spin on that, and their property still lives on in perpetuity, that their baby, but we can refocus things on a younger, maybe more demanding, or different type of consumer, but in the same format with a little window dressing and a lot of care and love from the staff side.
Well, yeah, I mean, and what you guys are doing is like you're building a brand around
You got
these
it.
properties, right? And it's a cohesive brand as opposed to kind of these incredible properties, but you have to do your research every single time to figure out like, okay, is this the place I'm looking? Once I've stayed at a Campfire Ranch and I've had a Campfire Ranch experience, even if it's an inn I'm staying in, or a B&B, or a cabin versus like a campsite, I know that there are going to be some consistencies, right? Because I had a great experience the first time staying in a different kind of unit type. It's in a different market. Of course, there are going to be differences. Those are variables, but there are also going to be sort of the consistency, the amenities, the personal care, and the concierge component, or whatever it is that you guys kind of offer folks. And I think that's what you guys are doing is super smart. There's a huge opportunity to build meaningful brands in this space. Do you guys think, speaking about the consumer, because I think a lot of times when I talk to folks on this podcast and whatnot, you've got folks that kind of wear their real estate hats very like proudly, and then you've got folks who have an incredible property, but it's like maybe it's one short-term rental or a couple of like beautiful short-term rentals that are cabins in the woods, like 2 miles down from where they live or something like that. And those two kind of perspectives, I think, are both very, very important. They're oftentimes like on opposite ends of the spectrum. It's not every day that I talk to somebody who is building an opco, but specifically a brand layered on top of that has big ambition to scale. When you think about just kind of growth, and you think about the consumer, what do you guys think your consumers want and or need? Like, where's the white space? Like, what could you guys offer that Marriott just signed a couple. I mean, they bought Postcard Cabins, formerly Getaway. They just signed another, I think, strategic partnership or exclusive agreement with what was the name of that company? They are some outdoor hotel brand. Oh gosh, it's escaping me. Anyhow, my listeners
There's a lot of them these days.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of them. There's a lot of them these days. It was in the news relatively recently. Anyhow, they're building. They have got, I think, like 12 hotels right now. Anyways, point being, this is clearly a strategic area of interest for consumers. It's clearly like where things are going. What white space do you guys see? Speaking again about the consumer that you guys are trying to deliver on? Like, what are the promises that you're trying to deliver on?
Yeah, that's a good question and a hard nut to crack ultimately. But I like to kind of factor in is like you've seen this in food and beverage at scale, right? There's one good property somewhere. It's got this character. It's got this notoriety. Maybe it's even kind of like the weird dive bar, and then they open a second location and it crushes it in a
Mm,
relatively near neighboring market, and then maybe there's a third, but then all of a sudden investment comes in and they take this localized brand and just like throw it everywhere, and it loses all of its soul.
yeah.
And I think from an outdoor perspective, with outdoor consumers being one of them, we have some extreme brand loyalty. Like you ride a certain brand of bike, and like it's hard for you to not buy that bike or that
Mm,
certain pair of skis. Like you're kind of brand hooked, and you're telling your friends about it. You think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Like we have this like brand connection in our
mm,
purchase decisions. Really, aside from price, it's like functionality and a little bit of notoriety. And so I think our generation latches onto brands that bring them back value. And
mm,
if we can do that in each market that we roll into, and we look at it specifically, like I don't look at Campfire Ranch's expansion to Arkansas as a way to get Coloradans to Arkansas. I look at it
mm.
as a great offering for people visiting Arkansas. Down the road, I can tell them about Colorado, but I want to go to Arkansas and be there for those people specifically.
Yeah.
Later on, that piece happens. So I think that mindset is where we'll be a little different from those kind of paying attention to this outdoor and hotel space. Also, like we see through the BS as outdoor consumers. I like to say it's like you can change the colors on a Holiday Inn, you can put a trout above the door, but is that hard? Is that fisherman going to walk in and be like, "This is my fishing lodge"? Like we see through it, right? And that cool spot down the street that actually has fishermen on staff and is on the water, is willing to go with you, is willing to kind of show and experience their local backyard, which is what we're trying to build, is going to win in the long run, and maybe not be as massive of a real estate company or massive as a business, but is going to have pretty dedicated authenticity. And right now we see over 40% of our customer base is either a return customer, a friend referral, or comes through social, which is
Mm,
all organic. And to me, that like tells me like we're hitting it. We got to watch it and make sure we continue to do that and stick with that authenticity once we go to scale. But that's probably my best answer to that question, is kind of trying to go in and take it one step at a time. Watch the competition, watch the other options. But you mentioned it earlier. It's like the best Airbnb experiences in the country are the ones with a host. There's a
yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Someone's
Yeah.
curating that day to day, hour to hour to make that a special experience. Like that's a huge component of our business that we double down on.
Yeah, no, I think it's super smart. For the listeners also watching at home, Trailborn was the name of the company that I was forgetting. They just signed some exclusive deal with Marriott. But Sam, what you were saying there, I think is super crucial for a couple reasons. One, right, you're building for a customer segment that isn't easily pleased. Like I'd say,
Yeah.
like true, like I mean, true outdoors people, right? They're salts of the earth individuals. Like they're not going to be convinced by a trout over a Holiday Inn, right? And I think that what's cool about that is you've got a consumer with opinion, right? You got a specific consumer with taste, with an ideal version, right? That with a version of what an ideal experience for them could look like, right? And if you can be the people that go and bring that experience to that individual, right, and say like, hey, I'm going to take the time, I'm going to listen, I'm going to give you the attention that you need, right, to understand how to build a concept that works for your community, that is an authentic representation of your backyard. That's where you win. And quite frankly, like one of the things that I think is most exciting about building a new enterprise, being an entrepreneur, right, is that uh, folks have bad taste in their mouth for the big guys, right? Like they don't want Marriott in their backyard. They don't want like a Hilton Garden Inn coming in and throwing some fisherman apparel in the lobby and calling it for a place that's local to the community, right? Even though like even if like the Holiday Inn is, owned by a local in the community, which, many of these obviously hotels are actually independently owned and operated, even if they, carry a flag. But that's not what people want. What people want is campfire, right? And so like you have this unfair advantage of being able to like say, hey, like no, like we're small, like we're boutique right now. We want to build something. We want to build something valuable for the consumer. In order to build anything valuable for consumers at scale, you do need scale, right? So like you got to be in places, right? You got to find markets to be in. But right, you guys sound like you're taking the time to really understand these locations and understand what people desire. And at the end of the day, like that's the path. Like that's the path that I would bet on. When you guys are doing this, like what does that practically look like? You guys going down and like sitting at like a bar and like just talking shop with the bartender? Like who are you sourcing, your I guess your intel from?
Yeah, good question. No, I think you hit it on the head there too. And to add to that, it's like it's reciprocal as well,
Mm,
right? Like if you can build a relationship with these customers in these markets, then they go in turn go out and treat it well. It's like I
yeah.
like to say like we have the best campers in Gunnison Crested Butte because like we spent 30 minutes with them when they arrived and told them where not to park and watch out for the wildflowers and here's the overflow parking lot, like because we
Mm,
care, like don't
mm,
go tromping our stuff, but also now they're going to tell their friend that comes visit next time. It's like it's super reciprocal and you kind of get this added value. So when we think about like um, market selection and like picking the right place. We definitely use our network a lot.
mm,
Thankfully, I've traveled all over the U.S. from an outdoor perspective most of my life, so that helps. But like we're certainly not experts in every market, and we definitely don't live in every market. So we try and spend a lot of time in those places. There's definitely areas that we see as like a high rating and want to like actively look and shop for properties in. In other situations, we like to find, kind of areas of opportunistic opportunity
yeah.
and kind of stay on the pulse, but like we're not like spending a lot of time in those markets. When we do get to kind of like what we consider like stage two due diligence, that's generally when we're out doing a site visit. We just did one recently in a community, and three of our staff went for a weekend with the trail running shoes, with the mountain bike, with the skis. We hit every bar we could find with a happy hour. We stayed up late asking people like where they're from, what they do, what do they think about this, where do outdoorsy people play. We walk the streets, right? We take the Uber if we have to. And a lot of people probably say like, oh, we go to market and do a market check. Like we actually pick, who's playing Urban Explorer this weekend, who's playing Outdoor Guru, who's playing Destination Planner, customer segment. Like, all right, everybody go. It's like a little bit of a scavenger hunt. We come back and kind of assess whether we think it feels right. A lot of
Mm,
that's gut feel, but you can get a good feel and you can talk to a lot of people. And then if all that goes well, then it's like, okay, who's our capital partner on this deal? Let's go find
yeah.
all of them, ask their opinions on the market, take every phone call you can get. You post on your own personal social, like who knows someone that lives in this town. Like I just want to pick their brains.
Yeah.
I don't think the big guys are doing that. Maybe they
No.
are, but
Yeah.
that's how I want to do it.
Not, I mean, and not at that detail. And I think one of the things that you hear a lot too is obviously anytime there's some new hotel coming or there's some new development, like there are the mob of people that don't want that, right? Actually, where I live right now, everyone's like fighting. There's a casino that wants to come into town,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And everyone's fighting it, right? And I'm actually thinking this is a big decent idea for business, whatever. But like,
Yeah.
point being, people have strong opinions on any new development, especially if it's got any sort of like meaningful scale. But what I've always found as a traveler, and like my wife and I did the whole like nomad thing for a year and a half,
Sweet.
and we stayed in a bunch of like really like random towns, right, during COVID, and it was like amazing, right? And but you would always find it's like you're sitting at a bar, you're having talking to somebody next to you, and at a coffee shop, whatever it was, and folks like want to tell you about their community. They
Yeah.
want to show it off. And like I'm like, hey, I'm not, just so you know, like I'm not like moving here. Like I'm not from here, right? You understand? And you're always met with, or at least we were like met with such grace. People are excited to show off the thing that they think is special, right? And so this
Totally.
idea that like, these more rural, communities or whatnot, like are opposed to tourism. Like I don't believe that that's true. I believe that they want to protect the things that they love about their community, right? And they want maybe the right partners, but people want to show off what they love, and they
Yeah.
want to show off their communities, right? And many of them, like, many of them like, take a lot of pride in that, right? And so I've always been intrigued by, you hear things in the news all the time, or you see some big, and yes, okay, maybe if Hilton's going to come build a 750 room resort, and it's going to take away the mountain that folks love to ski on, maybe that's a problem, right?
Sure.
for several individuals, but I think what you guys are doing, one, is at a scale that's really attractive, and then two, you're taking the time to like really invest in ways that you can into the community ahead of time, so that you can reduce friction on the other side of things. And I think that's not just admirable, it's just savvy. It's very savvy, and it's the way to do things. And so I get really excited about this space and this moment, because I see more and more entrepreneurs like yourself stepping in, having cool ideas, building out these new concepts, and actually like maybe being able to offer consumers kind of the differentiated experience that they want, and that they would normally have to go to a big brand for, but can now actually go to a startup brand that has better trust with the community to begin with, right? That has cooler offerings than you'd get with any sort of like major flag. And it's a win for the consumer, and it's a win for you guys. It's a win for the community. And like being able to do that, like have a trifecta of a win like that, that's I think what the future of hospitality is. And that's what people like you are building, which is just absolutely incredible to see.
Oh, thanks, Zach. Yeah, it's and top of it all, it's a lot more fun to do it that way.
Yeah. Oh, it is, man. Well, hey, I want like, what's next? So are you guys raising money for your opco? Like, if people are listening and they want to like participate in Campfire Ranch at all, is there a way they might be able to do so financially? Are you looking for land partners? Are you looking for like just other people with intel on great spots for Campfire? Like for listeners who want to learn a little bit more about you, or want to learn a little bit more about how they might be able to help you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for offering that. So yeah, we're currently raising capital for the opco at the moment. We've done a few rounds in the past and have an amazing group of investors that are really part of the family. And so we're always looking for more people, both individuals and folks on the more sophisticated capital side that want to be part of that family, and that what we're building at Campfire. So that's always on the table, and people can always reach out. The other side of it is, we're always looking to find the right cool properties. So, I think no area is too, out there or far away from Colorado. We're excited to look at different spaces, whether you're currently operating something and looking to move on, or looking for someone that you want to partner with to bring that to life that fits the Campfire Ranch mold. Like always down to talk through that. And we're always looking for real estate partners when we do find something cool. So.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, I'm super pumped by what you guys are doing. I think it's special, it's unique, and it's exciting. So thank you for, first and foremost, leaving the comforts of the day job to go pursue something more entrepreneurial.
Thanks.
And for coming on the show and sharing a little bit of your story. If folks want to just kind of follow you and stay connected to you, we can have links to your Instagram or your LinkedIn or anywhere. Where in particular are you most active for folks to connect?
Yeah, I'd say if you want to get a feel for Campfire Ranch and what we're all about, Instagram is probably the best place to start. You can follow us at campfire_ranch. Pretty easy, or just search us. And then our website is campfireranch.co. I'll make sure you have that stuff, Zach. And then those who want to talk on the business side can reach out to me directly as well. With my stuff's on the website, but I'll get it to you.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, we appreciate it. It's super cool to like talk with you. I've been a big fan of the podcast for a long time, and it serves a lot of inspiration. So please keep doing what you're doing too, because it kicks some of us in the corporate world in the butt a little bit to get out and push it and build something amazing.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it's so much fun to talk to people like you guys. So yeah, I'll have your links in the show notes below if you guys want to stay connected with Sam and or just check out Campfire. Just scrolling down to the show notes, and all the appropriate links will be there. Sam, thanks so much for your time, man.
Thanks, Zach. Great to hang. Appreciate it.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays, or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.